All right, ready to dive into some seriously strange sayings.
Sounds fun.
Today, we're tackling idioms. Uh, those phrases that make absolutely zero sense
Right.
if you take them literally.
Yeah.
And we've got a whole bunch of sources about what happens when people actually do that.
You know, it's really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Idioms, they really reflect like culture and history.
Huh?
They pick up meanings over time that you'd never guess just from the words themselves.
Totally. Like, imagine telling someone to break a leg before, like, a big game.
Yeah.
And they're like, uh, should I really?
Haha.
That's the kind of stuff we're looking at today.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. Break a leg comes from the theater world.
Oh, right?
It's wishing someone good luck before a performance.
Hmm.
But if you don't know that, well, you could end up with a very confused athlete.
Or a broken one. I'd much rather someone tell me to hold your horses if I was getting a little too carried away.
That's another one that can be really funny if you misunderstand it.
Yeah.
Imagine like a city kid who's never even seen a horse. Right.
And someone tells them to hold their horses. They might literally start looking for reins.
Oh, I can picture it now.
Yeah.
Speaking of pictures, the ball is in your court. I always imagine someone pulling out a tennis racket in the middle of a meeting.
Yeah, it really shows how idioms can be so confusing.
Right.
If you don't know where they come from. This one comes from tennis, of course.
Makes sense.
So someone who's never played might be totally lost.
It makes you think how many idioms we use every day that sound totally weird to someone who doesn't know them.
It's more than you think, for sure. Take, let the cat out of the bag.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, who decided that's the way to describe telling a secret?
Seriously. The article I read said it might be because of dishonest merchants way back when.
Oh.
They'd sell piglets in bags, but sometimes swap them for a cat.
Wow.
Letting the cat out exposed their scam.
Huh. That makes sense.
Okay, this next one's kind of dark, but interesting. Bite the bullet. To face something tough. The article suggested it's linked to old-timey surgery. Oh, before anesthesia and all that.
Yeah. Patients would literally bite a bullet to deal with the pain.
Wow. It's amazing how idioms can come from such specific places in history.
And then they become these everyday sayings we don't even think twice about.
It really is.
Wild. Okay, speaking of everyday sayings, spill the beans.
Oh, everyone's used that one.
For sure.
Okay.
But have you ever seen anyone actually spill beans while also revealing a secret? I picture this awkward dinner party.
Oh, yeah.
Someone's confessing something juicy and beans are flying everywhere.
Now that you mention it,
Yeah.
I think I have witnessed a real-life bean spilling. It wasn't a secret confession or anything,
Okay.
but definitely lots of spilled beans and a very flustered person. It's funny how those little coincidences can make idioms come to life.
Totally. All right, before we move on to some lighter idioms, we got to talk about kick the bucket.
Ah, yes, that's our euphemism for, well,
Death.
right. It can be a tough one, but it also has potential for humor.
Our source. Imagine someone asking if the bucket ever kicks back after someone kicks the bucket.
Uh-huh. A bit morbid. But it reminds us that humor can help us deal with difficult stuff.
Definitely. Okay, let's lighten the mood now. Piece of cake, super easy.
Yeah.
I bet we've all been there thinking we're getting actual cake,
Right.
only to find out it just means something simple.
Total letdown for cake lovers.
Ugh, the worst. Speaking of disappointment, have you ever been caught in a downpour and someone says it's raining cats and dogs?
Oh, for sure. I always end up looking up half expecting to see animals falling from the sky.
Me too. The origins of that one are fascinating.
Really?
Some connected to Norse mythology and a goddess with a cat-drawn chariot.
Wow.
Others say it's from medieval times when heady rain would wash animal carcasses through the streets.
Huh. That one's both grim and interesting.
It is. Well, I think we've covered a good chunk of our idiom list for part 1.
All right.
But don't worry, we've got plenty more linguistic gems to unpack in part 2.
Back for more idiom fun.
I'm still thinking about those raining cats and dogs theories.
Right. From mythology to medieval streets. Pretty wild for such a lighthearted phrase.
It shows how idioms can be like these little pieces of history hidden in language.
Totally. So moving from history to like how we interact with each other,
Okay.
butter someone up always makes me smile.
Oh, that one's perfect for misunderstandings. Can you imagine someone actually trying to butter up their boss?
Haha. So awkward. Makes you wonder where it came from.
Right.
Was there ever a time when people literally buttered each other up?
Maybe it was like a medieval bribe, a gift of fancy butter.
Interesting. Whatever the origin, it shows how we use language to influence people.
Yeah, sometimes in roundabout ways. Speaking of roundabout, beat around the bush drives me crazy.
Uh-huh, I know what you mean. Our source described it like someone with a stick
Oh, yeah.
racking a bush trying to find what they're supposed to be talking about.
So frustrating.
It might come from hunting. Hunters would beat around bushes to flush out animals.
So avoiding being direct has been around for a while. But sometimes you got to be direct, like when you're throwing caution to the wind.
Haha, yeah. That image is hilarious and kind of scary at the same time.
It's like they're trying to make their worries disappear.
But ignoring caution can backfire. It's a good reminder to think about risks.
Definitely. Have you ever had to wrap your head around something?
All the time. When you're struggling with an idea, trying to make it click.
Our source imagined someone literally contorting their head around an object. Silly, but I get it.
It shows that understanding takes effort.
Yeah, you can't always force your brain to get it instantly. Okay, back to secrets. Keep it under your hat. I always picture someone stuffing a note under a fedora.
Haha. Good image. But probably not the best place to hide secrets.
Not at all. This next one hits close to home. Have a lot on your plate.
Oh, I know that feeling. Overwhelmed with responsibilities.
The article describes someone balancing tons of food on their plate. Relatable.
It's like when your to-do list gets so long, you just know it's going to collapse. Ugh, the worst. And sometimes, when you have too much on your plate, you end up biting off more than you can chew.
Perfect way to put it. That feeling of taking on too much.
I picture someone trying to bite this giant sandwich.
Haha, exactly. It reminds us to know our limits and set boundaries.
We don't have to be superheroes. Speaking of limits, between a rock and a hard place, a tough situation with no easy answers.
The article had someone stuck between a boulder and, well, something hard.
I feel that way sometimes.
We all do. And in those situations, all you can do is face the music.
I imagine someone being marched in front of a band.
To confront their actions. Haha, not quite what it means, but it gets the point across.
Facing the music can be tough. Sometimes it means admitting a mistake or dealing with consequences.
For sure. Have you ever been told you have your head in the clouds?
Oh, constantly. I'm a big daydreamer, so I get it.
The article literally had someone's head stuck in the clouds.
It's funny, but it also shows how important it is to stay present.
Yeah, otherwise you might miss the boat on something. That image of someone running for a departing ship.
It's a good reminder to grab opportunities.
They might not always be there waiting for us. And if you do miss out, you can always turn over a new leaf.
Love that one. It's like starting a new chapter.
So hopeful. Speaking of new beginnings, sometimes you gotta be on the ball.
Ready for anything. The article had someone literally balanced on top of a ball.
Uh-huh. So silly. But it means being prepared.
Exactly. And when challenges come up, sometimes you gotta go the extra mile.
That makes me picture someone sprinting past the finish line of a marathon.
Going above and beyond. Sometimes you gotta do that even when you're sitting on the fence about something.
Indecision, right? Like you can't pick a side.
The article had someone perched on a fence, unable to decide.
Stuck in limbo. But eventually you gotta jump off the fence one way or another.
And sometimes that jump can lead to things going off the rails.
Ooh, like a train derailing?
Yeah.
Plans going wrong.
It reminds us that things don't always go as planned. And then you might have to pay the piper.
That makes me think of someone handing money to a grumpy musician.
Basically, our actions have consequences. Sometimes those consequences can leave you feeling like your mind is boggling.
Oh, yeah. Like your brain can't handle it.
The article described it as a brain exploding. A bit much, but you get the idea.
It's a good reminder that it's okay to not have all the answers.
Sometimes you gotta embrace the mystery and look before you leap.
Carefully checking things out before taking a risk.
Exactly. Assess the situation. Think about consequences.
And if something feels overwhelming, you can cross that bridge when you come to it.
Don't borrow trouble from the future.
Deal with things as they come. Otherwise, you might end up in hot water.
I always imagine someone stewing in a boiling bath.
It's a good reminder to think before you act.
Your choices have consequences. But even if you find yourself in hot water, there's always a way out.
You can learn from mistakes and move on. Speaking of moving on, sometimes you gotta cut to the chase.
But to the point, the article had someone hacking through a jungle.
To reach their destination quickly.
Especially when you're on pins and needles waiting for something.
That nervous anticipation, like you're literally sitting on pins.
And while you're waiting, someone might try to pull the wool over your eyes.
That image is so sneaky. Trying to trick someone.
Be careful, not everything is what it seems. We gotta trust our gut. And if you do bark up the wrong tree...
Make a mistake, basically.
That's okay, we all do. Just learn from it and move on.
Speaking of mistakes, I bet we've all put our foot in our mouth at some point.
Sure. Saying something totally awkward.
The article had someone literally stuffing their foot in their mouth.
Yikes. Makes you wish you could take it back.
Think before you speak, especially in delicate situations. Now, have you ever been at the edge of your seat?
Oh, yeah. Totally engrossed in something.
So captivated by what's happening.
Like when a movie or book just pulls you in.
It shows the power of a good story. And when things get tough, you got to hang in there.
Don't give up. The article had someone clinging to a cliff. It's about resilience. We can overcome challenges, and sometimes you just got to let your hair down and have some fun.
Letting loose and being carefree.
It's good to be serious sometimes, but we need fun too. And when it is time to be serious, you've got to lay your cards on the table.
Be honest and upfront. The article had someone revealing their cards.
It builds trust. And in relationships, it's important to read between the lines.
Understand those unspoken messages, like being a detective.
Exactly. And sometimes when you're overwhelmed, you might be lost in the sauce.
Like wading through a sticky mess.
Feeling confused and mentally drained, remember to take breaks and recharge.
Yeah, we can't run on empty. Speaking of recharging, sometimes you just got to kick back and relax.
Put your feet up and let out a sigh. Take care of yourself.
We need that to face the world. When you're fully recharged, you're raring to go.
Full of energy and ready for anything, like a racehorse at the starting gate.
That's passion and enthusiasm. Use that energy wisely and you can hit the ground running.
Be prepared and seize the day. But sometimes, even with preparation, something might scare you stiff.
That feeling of being frozen by fear.
It's okay to be scared. We're all human.
What matters is how we deal with it. Sometimes after a tough situation, you just end up dead tired.
Totally drained. The article had someone collapsing from exhaustion.
Remember to rest and recover. And when you do, you can get back on your feet.
Stronger than before.
Setbacks happen, but they don't have to stop us. And when you bounce back, you're raring to go again.
Ready for new challenges. It's all about attitude. Sometimes it's good to get lost in thought.
Letting your mind wander. The article had someone lost in a maze of their own thoughts.
It's good to reflect and connect with yourself, but it's also important to live in the moment.
Appreciate the now.
Be present and enjoy the little things. And when life throws you a curveball, roll with the punches.
Be flexible and adapt. The article had a boxer dodging punches.
Sometimes the best plan is no plan at all. Trust your gut. When something amazing happens, you might say your heart skipped a beat.
That feeling of pure excitement or surprise.
Shows how connected our emotions and our bodies are. And speaking of emotions, butterflies in your stomach.
That nervous, excited feeling.
The article had butterflies fluttering around in someone's stomach. A bit silly, but I get it.
It's okay to feel those things. They're normal. Sometimes the best way to deal with them is to go with the flow.
Embrace change. Be flexible. Trust the process.
Let go of control and enjoy the ride. As we wrap up our idiom journey, remember, language is powerful.
Idioms are more than just words.
They show us how we think and feel.
They connect us to history and culture.
So pay attention to the idioms you use and hear.
You might be surprised by what you discover.
We're back for our final round of idiom discoveries. My brain feels like it's been doing somersaults after all those visual interpretations.
It's definitely been a workout for the imagination.
But that's what's so cool about idioms.
Right.
They make you think in totally different ways.
Oh.
Speaking of thinking differently, do you have any favorite idioms? Ones you use all the time, or maybe ones that you find particularly interesting?
That's a tough one. I think I'm really drawn to the ones with surprising origins, like raining cats and dogs.
Yeah.
It's just so whimsical and unexpected, but it comes from some kind of dark history.
It's crazy how language changes over time and takes on new meanings.
It really is. And it shows us that there's often way more to an idiom than you might think at first.
I love that. It's like each one is a puzzle waiting to be solved.
Exactly. And figuring them out can be both fun and educational.
Yeah. So as we wrap up our idiom deep dive, what are some key things you hope our listeners are taking away from this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that idioms are more than just these quirky sayings. They give us a peek into the history, the culture, even the psychology of the people who use them.
They really show us that language is always changing and adapting, just like the world around us. And they highlight how important it is to understand each other and the context of what we're saying.
For sure.
What might be totally clear to one person can be completely confusing to someone else.
Exactly.
Which is where the humor comes in. When idioms clash with real life, it reminds us to have a sense of humor about language.
Yeah.
And to never be afraid to ask if we don't get something.
Definitely.
So to our listeners, I hope this deep dive has made you curious about idioms.
Yeah.
Maybe inspired you to pay more attention to the language you use and hear every day.
Because you never know what interesting tidbits you might find.
Happy idiom hunting, everyone.